Today, we're proud to officially announce the United States of America's gold standard childhood vaccination recommendations, and that has to do with many subjects, but including autism in particular.
Last week, Donald Trump signed an executive order calling for fewer childhood vaccines, sprouting links to autism, which have been definitively disproved by scientists and health organisations around the world.
Decades ago, children received only a small fraction of the vaccines required today. In those times, people were much healthier, and of course, the high rates of autism now observed did not exist.
During Trump's second term, the misinformation from the president and his health secretary, RFK Jr, has been relentless, undermining public trust in vaccines as outbreaks of previously eliminated diseases flare up again.
And I saw this early on, and I've seen proof of it, where they have a vaccination thing, looks like the size of a bottle of soda, poured into a little child's body, and bad things happen in many cases, in too many cases, because this is an explosion, this is an epidemic.
I'm Ruby Jones, and you're listening to 7am. Today, Professor of Public Health at the University of Sydney's Infectious Diseases Institute, Julie Leask, on the politicisation of anti-vax sentiment and the implications for Australia. It's Tuesday, August 18. So, Julie, I thought we could begin with the executive order Trump signed last week to reduce childhood vaccines and break up the measles, mumps and rubella shot. Watching that announcement unfold, what were your thoughts?
Well, I was pretty horrified because it's going to create a whole lot of stress for parents who get confused about whether this vaccine is safe as it is, measles, mumps, rubella as one combined shot. And it's not great for kids if that means that parents delay or miss out vaccines altogether, because they'll be vulnerable to diseases like measles, mumps and rubella. Measles can hospitalise 1 in 10 children. And we have outbreaks at the moment in Australia, the US, many countries.
This is what gold standard science means. No predetermined answers, no institutional taboos, no sacred cows, no hiding uncertainty. Test the hypothesis, examine the data, replicate the results, tell the public what we find, and be honest.
We've already seen an impact on the confidence of parents in Australia. And we know that through a few ways. One is just the sheer number of times we're told by the health professionals who give vaccines that they're hearing more concerns about vaccination that look a lot like the kinds of misinformation that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and others are putting out from the US.
For decades, I fought for a simple principle. When it comes to the health of our children, government has an obligation to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Tell the American people the truth and give parents.
So in a survey undertaken by my colleagues in the National Vaccination Insights Project last year, 14% of parents of respondents in this national survey said that they'd heard things about vaccination recently that had worried them. And when we asked in open text response what those things were, there was a lot about what Trump was saying in the US about vaccines and children being given too many and so forth. So it's really bad news for public health and incredibly irresponsible for the US leadership to be making these pronouncements.
And so how does that translate then to rates of childhood vaccinations in Australia? How widespread is it for families to either decide not to vaccinate their children or to minimise the shots?
So we've got vaccination rates in Australia that are declining. For 2-year-olds, for example, they've come down from about 92, 93% during the pandemic to now just 89%. Now, that might seem like a small percentage point drop, but it represents tens of thousands of children who are missing out on timely vaccination for the rest of their childhood and potentially into their adulthood if they don't get catch-up vaccines. And the reason for those low vaccination rates are not just about concerns that people have They're also about access to services. So that's a big part of getting kids vaccinated on time. And we need to remember that convenient, easily accessible services that are free to access are a huge part of high vaccination rates.
And Australia does now have things in place that essentially does force parents to vaccinate their children if they want them to go to daycare or kindergarten, for example. So what effect do you think those systems are having?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of things in place that require vaccination for families to receive family assistance payments if they're eligible, and for families to get them into preschool or childcare in many of our states and territories. And those requirements mean that quite a lot of people have this very significant incentive, if you like, to vaccinate. For some, it would be a requirement because they really can't manage without those things, those assets, the money or the childcare access. In research done by the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance, they found that there was an increase in vaccination coverage from these requirements that were introduced. The No Jab, No Pay legislation was brought in 2015, and those requirements have led to more kids being vaccinated on time, but there are also these other policy side effects, if you like, where, for example, if it's a requirement for children to be fully vaccinated so they can go to daycare, some parents will not budge and those kids miss out on early childhood education.
Coming up, the worrying rise in local measles outbreaks.
Health authorities are warning Australians to be on high alert as cases of measles rise across the country. Falling vaccination rates combined with overseas travel are thought to be the cause.
Julie, as you said, we have already seen local outbreaks of measles in children in Australia. Can you tell me a bit more about how dangerous that is and how concerned you might be about what we could see moving forward?
Yeah, so measles is a respiratory viral infection. It's incredibly contagious. It can hospitalise 1 in 10 children. It can cause pneumonia, middle ear infection, and in a rare number of cases, brain inflammation. And what we have is certain pockets in the population where people are not immune to measles for a bunch of reasons. One, they might not have had any vaccines. Two, in a tiny number of people, the vaccine fails. And for some people, they might go overseas where there's very large outbreaks of measles in some countries. They come back and they might seed a local outbreak. But in 2025, there were 181 notified cases of measles in Australia, and this year so far there have been 112.
And all of this really speaks to this kind of broader issue of deteriorating trust in health authorities. I mean, how else are you seeing that play out?
Yeah, so the data on trust paints a pretty diverse picture. So if you measure trust in the population in Australia overall, you'll see it being pretty stable over the last 10 years, certainly trust in public institutions, with a bit of a decline since the pandemic. However, if you dig down a bit, you see some concerning patterns. So, for example, with vaccination, the National Vaccination Insights Project surveyed in 2024 and 2025 found that the proportion of people who did not trust information about vaccines from their doctor or nurse increased from 6.5% to 9%. In just 1 year. There are certain groups we're also seeing on differences in support for vaccination emerging between the left side of politics and the far right side of politics. And that is a concern because what we don't want to see is vaccination to become increasingly tied up with identity politics, particularly on the far right, because then that means for an individual, oh, well, people like me, people who I look up to say I shouldn't trust vaccination, I should be more sceptical, then therefore I should not trust vaccination. And that could potentially bring a whole lot of people around to declining vaccination, which is just not great for them, their families or their communities.
And that's what we're seeing here, right? The politicisation of anti-vax sentiment. What impact do you think that will have when we hear politicians like Trump or RFK Jr. question the safety of childhood vaccines?
Look, I think that the worst thing about what's happening with RFK Jr. being in his position is for the US population. And actually, the worst thing that could happen to vaccination coverage is to remove access to insurance for poorer families in the US. But for Australia, I think that what's happening in the US is going to keep this kind of thread of doubt coursing through the rhetoric around vaccination. People might, in their big, information diet, hear snippets of headlines saying, Trump's casting doubt on the safety of this vaccine or that vaccine. They might then wonder, gosh, is this true? What should I do about it? And just sort of seeding that level of doubt can make some people delay vaccines, or it can mean that they need to have more of a chat with their health professional about vaccination. And we know that primary healthcare professionals are really under the pump in terms of resourcing and time. So I am concerned about the impact of what's happening in the US because, usually if you have a vaccine safety scare, and there's nothing new about vaccine safety scares nor misinformation about vaccines. It's been happening since Jenner developed the smallpox vaccine. But if you have a scare, usually it's by a single, individual. Often it's a doctor. They go against the rest of their medical colleagues. The government's on side and they try and invest in addressing the scare and bringing confidence back. In this case, the government itself is responsible for scaring people off vaccines. So it's absolutely supercharging this misinformation and worrisome messaging about vaccines. So it's a tragedy for parents, really, in the end, who are trying to do the right thing by their kids and trying to navigate this misinformation minefield and figuring out what's right and wrong and who I can trust.
Julie, thank you so much for your time.
You are very welcome.
Also in the news, police are investigating an alleged sexual assault involving several Sydney Swans players. The club is also looking into the incident, which happened in Melbourne on Sunday night after the team's win against Essendon. Swans CEO Matthew Pavlich says he's shocked and disappointed that the players have found themselves in this situation. And around 250,000 Australians who deliver food and groceries are set to receive a legal minimum wage for the first time. Under new rules approved by the Fair Work Commission, workers will be paid a minimum rate of $31.30 an hour for engaged time from when they accept a job until the delivery is completed. Companies will also be required to provide a reasonable minimum level of personal accident insurance. I'm Ruby Jones. This is 7am. Thanks for listening.